Hi there. Today we have with us Craig Rajpal, Director of Enterprise Sales at Workato. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Sean. How's it going?
Awesome. Great to have you.
No, excited to be here. Looking forward to chatting today.
Absolutely. So tell us a little about yourself and where you work.
So I'm on the strategic sales team at Workato. I've been here for about 2 years or so, and I work at Workato, of course. And Workato is a massive player in the integration and automation space. They're very focused on creating the next enterprise OS. So my job and my aspirations are basically focused on landing the big whale, if you will, the Fortune 500 type customers, and really kind of selling to those, evangelizing Workato for those customers.
That's awesome. And I know before Workato, you were a founder yourself at a certain phase. What is it like to transition from being at a tiny startup to a fast scaling startup?
So I've been through a good number of very interesting startups throughout my career. So I was at a company called Carda back when they were, young in size. And, of course, Carda now is worth 4 billion
Sure.
or so. So it's great to have been like their first, or, like one of the first 5 employees in Salt Lake City. And then when I left, it was 180. And then similar to that, I've been a part of, other very fast growing early stage startup. That's usually the kind of stage of a company that I like to jump into, and it's been good. And as you said, like prior to like the startup journey of joining other folks and helping them grow their dreams, I was focused on one of my own. I had a hardware startup called LiveRail. I was focused on the
Nice.
visually impaired market, and there's so many commonalities between like when you're doing your own startups and when you're trying to do startup sales, right? Because it's always kind of like this blue ocean. Nothing's really been mapped out. You're trying to create your own way. You're trying to create your own strategies. 99 things out of 100 that you try absolutely fail in a disaster. One of those works, so you try to focus on that. And there's a lot of good learnings that follow through from the startup life into the sales career.
Yeah, no, that's so I'm sure you have an added edge there as a former founder. You're entrepreneurial and you're thinking about how you're doing your sales.
It's always, I think, I think the lessons are always common, right? It's always a bit of hustle that goes into it, whether you're trying to sell your own hardware products as a founder or trying to sell software as a SaaS salesperson, right? On the flip side, it's also quite a bit about finding the edge, or like, if you will, like finding the untapped market area, right? Like finding what resonates with the market. Like even it, like so many learnings from Workato and Carta, right? Like just having tried to do some of these, right? There's so many things you'll try which absolutely wouldn't work, but then there's one recipe for like ultimate success you'll figure out, and you try to keep replicating that message again and again, and that tends to work. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So very cool. So in terms of like where Workato is, in their, growth phase, would you say like, are they early? Are they like more mature? Because I wonder, when does this concept of like, whale hunting come? Like, usually startups start with focusing on like SMB, smaller deals. But what you're doing is like a much, it's like a 18 month sales cycle. When does that even, come onto the menu?
No, that's a very good question, right? So it's actually, one of the interesting things that I've seen is it's fairly common across the startup journey, right? If you look at and read about Databricks or like Snowflake back in the days, or like Carta, where I've been myself, or Reciprocity, which is another GRC startup where I've been myself, it's always kind of, it begins with, the kind of the self-serve, and a little bit above the self-serve level of sales, right? Where you're just trying to have people sign up on a website, put in their credit card, and just somehow get their hands on the product to kind of validate that yes, this is something of value, right? And that payment kind of justifies that value, that value essentially. And then furthermore, as you get further down in the funnel, whether it's Workato or Carta or so many of these other stage startups, right, as they try to go up market, they're all, really having that longer term sales cycles where they're trying to build these big narrative positionings and, capture the mind share in these larger enterprises so that they can, land at the low six figures to the, to the start seven figure kind of a stage on many of these contracts.
Right. No, very cool. So, is there like would you say, in terms of like, you've been in parts of different sales orgs, are there different styles? Like you go, I'm assuming Carta like probably started out selling more like to, smaller businesses, startups, and now you're like trying to go after fortunes. How would you characterize the different styles and maybe different playbooks?
So very well, right? So it's a very great question, right? In terms of how the organizations differ, right? Like back when I was at Card, I was very much like we were primarily selling to startups, small and medium ones, right? So folks who've just raised money, need something called 409A valuations, right? This is like a mandate that each startup has to kind of get done before issuing equity to their employees. So that was kind of the market we tried to tap into. The flow at Carta was very much inbound referrals from either our law firm partners or like our VC partners or like our CFO firm partners, right? It was very much inbound. The sales cycles were short. I'm thinking like, 30 days to like 60 days and 180 days kind of max on the upper side, right? But then even while I was at Carta, when we moved over to the mid-market side, right, the sales cycle started taking longer, right? We had to delve into the value of, like how cap table management provides a solid ROI, right? So every startup, I believe, goes through their up-market journey. And that's what I've seen at Workato. Like we've gone through a similar one, right? Like we're now going after the absolute whales, the Fortune 100s of the world, right? And we're equally focused on, I mean, again, Workato serves all different customers across the market, but primarily enterprises and medium enterprises, right? And then again, even in this market, we've had to rethink our positioning and how we add value to our customers. Again,
Totally.
different approaches for everything. And yeah.
Yeah. So at Chartloop, we have a lot of people that are selling into these IT orgs, right? Into these also, Fortune, whatever, 500, 1,000. And with you guys being in this, automation and integration space, what can you tell us about, approaching sales, into different IT orgs? Like what do you do here that you don't do when you're selling to, CFOs, for example?
Fair question. So one of the more interesting things is at Workato, it's it's actually common across like strategic sales cycles, especially when they're longer, right? Where one of the key steps in building this outbound plan as we try to go after an enterprise that's potentially going to pay us $500,000 to $1 million plus annually, right, in ARR. One of these is like really building there's this concept of stakeholder intelligence, right? It's always good to understand like who are the key stakeholders in an enterprise that we really need to go after. And then furthermore, that's how Sean and I kind of met for, like this is a big problem that I personally had, right? Like it's just hard to go through LinkedIn and build some of these charts to figure out like who are the right personas, who do we need to talk to? Like stakeholder mapping is just a big pain, especially in any large enterprise where there's like 80,000 employees, for example, right? And then going in and doing that was always a hassle. So I was Googling around and I find this amazing tool on Product Hunt called Chartloop, right? And they had a free trial back then, and I just basically click in and I searched for one of the companies that I was thinking of back then called McKesson, right? And I go in and I search for McKesson's chart, and I wait like 2 or 3 minutes. They basically populate the whole org chart in their IT, and I was like, wow, like this is exactly what I was looking at. So the next step that follows after that is basically trying to have specific messaging to each of these individuals. A director of transformation would care about very different things than a director of automation would or a VP of automation would, right? Similarly, a VP of integration would have very different mindsets. So being able to kind of create a catered messaging approach towards all of these and then meeting these people throughout like a year-long cadence and having them, in a specific mind share with those folks really helps us kind of land that big size deal.
Right. So this is really, really fascinating. So maybe, drilling down into this account strategy or like building an account plan. So, if we can like break down the steps here. So like you mentioned, right, the different personas, each one cares about wildly different, goals and things that they're trying to accomplish. Like, what's the next step? Are you like creating, are you reaching out manually to each one? Are you doing like an automation sequence? Like, where does it go from there?
So since the approach is the bigger focus is less is more, right? That's kind of like the overhead, that's like the overarching narrative, right? That I don't want to go after, I don't want my team to like focus on like, like 30 different accounts. I would rather have like me being focused on 8 different accounts, which I know that, okay, even if I land only 2 of those deals, each of those can be like $500,000 to $1 million plus, right? So the focus is very much around a really firstly identifying who are the key and primary stakeholders in any of these accounts that we need to land with, right? So kind of having that access creation element. And that only happens with conversations and really understanding when you chat with these folks, right? So understanding within the broader enterprise, like the personas that matter to us, like VP of digital transformation, VPs of robotic process automation, or like automation in general, VPs of, integration, right? It can also be like VP of, HR transformation, right? There's so many different personas where Workato can kind of sell to, right? Or like really add value to, better to say, right? Like marketing. It's a big use case within marketing. So first is identifying these, as they call it, not the CEO, but the CEO of the problem, right? Who is the person who is most
Totally.
impacted by the problem you want to solve? Like, who is the CEO of the problem, right? So in any large organization, there might be 8 to 15 of those personas, and then each of those people might have 20 people on his team just focused on solving that problem, right? So firstly, it's identifying, who are those key stakeholders that will really see the value out of this. And once we kind of engage with some of them, whether it's via LinkedIn, whether some of these are inbound, right? We can also take a very specific ABM approach in terms of how we retarget them on LinkedIn and, trying to get some of them
Sure.
inbound, right? And when essentially those value adding dialogues open up, those conversations tend to open up, that's when we're really starting to build some, what you'll call some sort of a business case for the broader organization to adopt Workato.
Nice. So do you work with each one? So I know the story of us meeting, right, is we very apropos to sales guys, right? An outbound email to you about a year ago when we were starting Chartloop, and we connected back then. It wasn't relevant then. Then you started, doing some more strategic work, and then we've been in contact ever since. So like this approach of creating an org chart. I know you've done this right manually before using our tool, but like what do you do beyond this? Is this like something you put up on your fridge? Like, do you share this with is it more like an internal team thing, or do you like go to your champion, like, okay, so I spoke to these 4 guys, like who else do we need to kind of move the deal? Like, how does that look in your process?
Yeah, so it's kind of such an interesting and evolving process, right? Like before Chartloop, it was very much like, hey, as I meet people or as I identify people, I'll keep kind of filling in the gaps. Now it's more so I know on day one where to begin the journey. So it's kind of been a bit transformational, right, of how I approach these cycles. Like, prior to this, it was very much like I meet some folks, I identify they're a key part of this big grand pyramid, which I don't really have every stakeholder mapped out yet, but now it's very much like, okay, I go on Chartloop and kind of, pull up the chart and I know who the right stakeholders are. So it's changed how I approach some of these cycles quite a bit. But I think one of the other factors is just, now on day one, we know, okay, look, we know who the VP of transformation is. We know who the right people are. We know what the change, if there's been any like big changes in the org, right? And we're able to kind of tap into each of these personas right away.
Totally. Do you make like an account plan, for each one? Like if you're going after a big company, like you mentioned, a McKesson or something like that, and then what goes in there? Like what should I be doing when I'm trying to sell into a big account?
So The great question, right? So one thing is, I mean, we always start with the 10K, right? The annual filings of every companies, right? We're going through, reading through those to kind of understand, are there like any cataclysmic events that have happened? Are there like any big North stars that the CEO is really talking about, right? So basically the first page of the account plan will be understanding, like oftentimes, like McKesson's a good example, right? They have three pretty primary divisions, right? They have like the pharmaceuticals divisions, they have their surgicals division, they have like another, they have their international markets, they operate in Canada, right? So firstly, it's really trying to break down and silo how these organizations really operate, because that's pretty key in terms of how we do our outreach, right? The second step is oftentimes having that vision from Chartloop, like the org chart, kind of pre-populated right in there, and then having essentially the folks that we know will be, the best ones that we can add the most value to, having those mapped out, right? And then the account plan, I believe it's not really a static piece of, like, it's not an artifact, right? It's very much an evolving document, right? As you meet these folks, you keep adding like what matters to them, right? So oftentimes we'll begin with one persona, identify what they really care about, like, their actual pain points, right? And then try to keep those jotting down with timelines and, specific, like, essentially catalysts, like what's driving that event, and like having that. And then by the end, like when I think of McKesson, right? Like I had an account plan for them. Like it was 4 tabs when I started it, right? Like a year ago. Now it's probably 16, which each tab is like probably 50 different, or like 100 different lines of, like, and now I know what the marketing team cares about. I know what the IT team really cares about. And, again, the journey keeps going on, right? And it's similar with other, the account plan is basically, it's serving as essentially, if I'm trying to come up with a good analogy for this, but it's basically like, it's a guide map, right? Of everything, every place you've been, and to give you a hint towards where you can go in an account, and like what
Totally.
they're really care about.
Totally. No, very, very insightful. And are you guys, using any of these? There's all these methodologies. There's Medpick, a bunch of others as the kind of guiding, or is it kind of more ad hoc?
I personally use Medpick quite a bit, which is same as Medic. P stands for
Sure.
paper process, because of any large enterprise.
There's a lot of it.
You'll be spending 3 to 4 months, on security, and like my most favorite thing in the world, MSA reviews, right? So yeah, so that we do. I do follow Medpick quite a bit internally, but yeah, that seems to work quite well. I mean, again, similar process as the buyer. Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's really cool. And would you say, like, think about yourself, like what type of style, like, salesperson would you categorize yourself? Like, some people are like very analytical. They'll know everything kind of happening inside an account or the market. Some people are like, more relationship driven. I know you've been at this for like 10 years. What's your kind of, secret sauce there?
It's going to be more leaning towards the relationship side, right? But identifying that you have to have real value that you can provide. Like, honestly, like I've been doing this for some time now, right? And one thing I've learned is that there has to be, you can have the best relationship in the world with your buyer, right? But unless you're solving a tangible, quantifiable, real problem that is costing them money, there is no sale for you to be made. There is no money for you to be made. So you have to have that quantifiable problem that you've identified. And again, I do believe that relationships go a long way, especially in competitive sales cycles, which most of these enterprise sales cycles are. So
Totally.
Leaning towards relationship, just to kind of summarize, leaning towards the relationship aspect, but then understanding that there has to be quantifiable pain that you're solving.
Right. And totally. What was like the most, most painful or controversial strategy you say you have to have done with one of your, accounts that you were working, or customers? I know this is like a
that's an
one.
interesting one. There's Good question. I'm just trying to think which examples would make the most sense. I, I wouldn't say controversial. I can share an insight that I've garnered from a recent sales cycle that I've been a part of. Again, we'll keep the names out for the customers, like just for
I'm
everyone
sure.
previous. Uh, there's this large that are retailer of like clothing stuffs, and there's if you live in any like suburb, there's one store of those close to you, right? So you can probably figure out which one it is. But
Okay.
in the United States, but one of the most interesting things I've seen is a strategy is a piece of evolving in nature from your customer's perspective too, right? So uh, we were I was trying to sell to them. We started as a very small minuscule kind of a land within the marketing org, right? And then one of the interesting things happened was I meet with like their CIO, their VP of integration strategy, like like these 5 or 7 we pushed and we got a meeting with all those folks, right? And the first session we had with them, they were like hard set on this other approach that they've outlined, which didn't include, of course, what I was trying to get them towards, right? And I was like, probably nothing here, right? They've given us like a no in the strongest of terms, right? There's really nothing here. And the interesting part that happened was over the next 5 months or so, by the way, they ended up changing their strategy after the discussions began. But one thing I think that's a good lesson for every salesperson is a hard no today doesn't mean a hard no tomorrow. And it could definitely mean a yes in like the next 3 to 5 or 6 months. So I think one of the interesting things is folks can seem pretty situated in their opinions and strategies until they learn about a better way. And as salespeople, our key job is evangelism about what the possibilities are and what the better way is, even though you might see a strong no at the beginning.
Totally. So with these big accounts that you're mentioning, like national retailers, I wasn't going to ask you like, the color of their logo, whether it's red or blue, but, you know, I'll leave it for people's imagination. But like, do you see these mega deals? Are they starting off? Do they start off as a 10K, a 50K, and then like, okay, in year 2 and 3, or like you go in like from zero and like, okay, let's do a $500,000 deal and let's work it.
So that's a good question, right? Honestly, some of these ones, like, if they're strategic in nature, you can do a bath, you can take a little bit of a bath and do it for like 20, 30, 40K, right? As long as there's a potential or a path to grow these to like $1 million plus type of a number.
Right.
It depends. Like, honestly, the way that I've personally seen it is, as long as even if it's a smaller dollar number, as long as we're solving a problem that's strategic in nature and is prone to grow in size, then we're very much going even at the lower dollar sizes.
Right. Totally. So you kind of plant the seed and then you, I guess you water it and slowly grow it. No, this is very insightful how you do your account planning and strategy around this. Do you use, I guess in the integration world, any tell me maybe a little bit about your stack of tools you use and any favorites there or recommendations for people?
Always use Salesforce since the start, right? Been with 5 SaaS companies, always use Salesforce with all of them, right? Gong and Chorus are 2 other interesting ones that have been popping up. I've been using Gong quite a bit recently. I really like it, quite a bit. Zoom Info is another one that tends to come to mind for just contact finding. They don't do a great job at charts, by the way. That's definitely Chartloop by all means, right? Those I would say probably are the more interesting ones. And then then again, as weird as it sounds, for all my account plans, I tend to use Excel to build them. Google Sheets,
Really?
but same, yeah.
Not even like slides or something. It's an actual spreadsheet.
So what I've tried to have longer account plans within spreadsheets, but the issue is I need a holistic picture in one glance, right? And spreadsheets can like if you're trying to add contacts and if you're trying to like dive into the details with all of these contacts and what they care about, like a slide decks aren't really the best mechanism for doing this. So I think Excel
Really
and
interesting.
spreadsheets work by far the best.
Okay, well, I'll see if we can even convince you to share with us a template or two or of something we can share with folks. Nice. And how about in terms of like, you know, any leaders or books on sales or growth you really like?
I really enjoy listening to podcasts from the Snowflake CRO, Chris Degnan. I really, you know, his journey with Snowflake was definitely kind of a little bit. I don't know the guy personally. I've never met him or anything, but I've heard enough about Snowflake, and you know, of course, I followed their stock price. Now they're public, but I really like listening to some of the podcasts that he's done, right? And then some of the books that I really love, of course, Chris Voss, everybody's read him, right? Never Split the Difference is a good one. Sales Differentiation by Lee B. Saul is another really good one. And I'm overall big fan of everything that Jeb Blount, he's the guy who wrote, you know, Sales EQ and Fanatical Prospecting. I'm a big fan of everything that he writes as well.
Nice. Really cool. Craig, this has been so where can people follow you online to maybe hear some more of your, you know, follow your journey?
LinkedIn. just on LinkedIn, Craig Rajpal, just yeah, send me a LinkedIn invite. Would love to connect.
Awesome. Well, Craig, this has been really thanks for your insight on account planning and winning our whales. I'm sure this is very insightful, and also for IT sales folks, and yeah, looking forward to connect.
Awesome. No, absolutely. Thank you, Sean.